Good. Good evening, everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording, and please keep yourselves on mute if you are on Zoom, please. Feel free to raise your hand virtually or put something in the chat if you have a comment. So we'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. The first thing I have on the agenda are drone pictures that were taken of Randall. So Melissa, do you have anything you'd like to say about it? I did print pictures of it, if that works, or, right, Denise has them too.
Got my 19-year-old son to send his drone up over the library so that we could get some overhead shots and really understand the footprint and the space that's available to use. So this is just the straight drone shot of the library area. And I think the most important thing I wanted to understand was, what do you see from Great Road? What do you see from the main intersection? And what do you see from Library Hill Road? So if you can pick up the turret, then you can see where the main entrance is, well, will be on Library Hill Road. And that's most of the 1975 edition faces the main intersection. So then I went to the 4 schemes, and I don't know if they're even still relevant, but this is design scheme A. I just overlaid it on top of the space that's available. And they're all, the footprint of the actual library is pretty much the same, but then, you know, B, C, and D, I think are basically just different with the ramp and the stairs and all of that. And the seating area, you know, the way you talked about the landscaping and the seating area are different on the floor. So that was just to give you an idea. And there you can see it, the little walkway we've talked about coming across to the garden, to the memorial across, oh gosh, what is that road called? Common. I didn't label that one. But again, you can see where the main intersection is. You're really just going to be looking at, as we talked about, that corner. That's really what you see when you're looking from the intersection. We love the old building that faces Library Hill Road, but again, that's not even, you almost can't see it from the intersection, and not a lot of people are driving up Library Hill Road, well, although they do come down from the school. And then Crescent Street also, to be aware of what's going on from there, because people do travel down Crescent Street and see the back end of the library. So that was it. I just wanted to share that with you, if anyone thought there was some value in that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, you want to sit here and sit over there?
Well,
Well, I have a computer, so I can see.
Yeah, turn on the screen.
Oh, I see.
Whatever it is.
Thank you. All right, I'll pass it over to Design Lab and G2 Collaborative.
Well, thank you all for coming again today, especially everybody in the audience. Looks like there's 11 participants on the screen, as well as everybody here. That's awesome to see. We're super excited about that, and we've prepared for people who haven't seen all of our presentations before. So we're going to go over a bit of stuff that we've been working on with the committees before. So we're going to cover some stuff that everybody's already seen, except it'll be new to all of you, but it's kind of to show you our process. And it's a simplified version of our process because we have been working with this team for quite a few months now, 4 months. So
Ready to share?
yes. So this will
Oh, try it.
do a little test here. Not working.
You know it does, it just takes a second to get.
Oh.
It did.
Shoot, I pressed this.
You should be able to go back.
Okay, it's working. Well, back here.
Denise, do you mind going to view and then full screen? Just make it a little.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you.
I don't have a full.
Full screen mode, yeah, done a little bit for, there you go.
We'll get there.
Just to think.
Great. So just really quickly, what we're gonna be going over today, we're gonna do some brief introductions for all of you that don't know the team. And then we're gonna briefly go over what we normally review with the building committee. So right now it's just the exterior building committee, and just to show you where the plans are at, because that affects the exterior significantly. And we're also gonna review the landscape design. We have our collaborators from G2 Landscape Architects here to review that. And then we're gonna jump into the exterior building, and we're gonna review some goals, massings, kind of the steps that we've taken to get here, and as well as some really great imagery and precedents that we've collected. So just brief introduction. My name is Andrew Brooks. I'm the project manager on this project. With me today from Design Lab are Ben Utes, who's a partner at Design Lab, and Audrey Scanlon.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone.
We also have G2. You guys-
I'm Gigi Saltonstall, I'm a principal at G2.
And Allison, I'm the designer.
And we have a much larger consultant team as well, who's not with us, including a handful of engineers, structural engineers, civil engineer, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, that whole team as well. So briefly go over our schedule. We are kind of approaching the halfway point of design. So we're in a phase called design development. About a month ago, we finished a shorter phase called schematic design, where we worked together with everybody to form the kind of program and the building layout and mostly the footprint. We're still massaging all of it, but that's where we kind of came to the initial conclusions. And now we're diving into a little more detailed aspects, which we'll look at. So we are on a second workshop of design development. Last week, we met with a town of 7 town departments. So I'll go over who those were in a bit. A lot of heavy size. And then we have 2 more workshops within design development, and then we're going to move into construction documents, which is when we really start to look at the details and how everything supports itself and colors and finishes. And in between that, we'll also be interviewing staff, and we're going to meet with town departments again. So there's still a lot going on and a lot to be determined. So briefly, something that we did a couple weeks ago is we brought whoever could come from the building committees to 3 libraries, or sorry, 3 projects, 2 of which are ours, and one on the one on the right is not our project, but recently won a really large award yesterday, actually. So the project on the left, though, was mainly to look at the exterior and how it's connected to a historic museum, as the Concord Museum, Rasmussen Center. The project in the middle is the West Branch Library, which is a addition that we did on a registered historic building. And both projects on the left were also with G2. So our town department meetings, you guys probably know a lot of these people that we met with, but we met with the fire chief, the police chief, the Green Advisory Committee, partial traffic and parking committee, partial zoning committee, and then of course Frank and Doug from the facilities. And then on top of all those meetings, a few of us also joined the Green Advisory Committee forum regarding the adoption of the specialized stretch code, which I believe you all are voting on in a few weeks, so that we could get our head wrapped around that requirement if that does go through. And then last Tuesday, there was a really interesting presentation at the library called the Library Land Projects, which is a whole presentation in itself, but it was partially about this library and partially about the surrounding libraries and how they're used and what they look like. So into the building plans and landscape overview. So over the last few months, we've been kind of gathering information from everybody. This started way back in 2021 when we did the surveys and the boards, and we had an online survey as well that went out to the whole community. We got something between 150 and 200 responses, I think, on those. And that's how we started to make these. And now we've been kind of confirming those responses. And so we've gathered an enormous amount of information about the important spaces. Here we've broken it down into the site, the meeting room, the teen spaces, the staff space, the collections, the reading space, and the children's space. And some key aspects are like we're looking for way more meeting rooms that are in the current library, because you can't multiply by 0. And, so we're looking at like a large flexible meeting space, but also 3 small meeting rooms, so that the tutors have their own spaces. We're also looking at a separate children's library and space, so that they can kind of do their activities without having to worry about the rest of the library. And of course, like better back of house spaces, better staff spaces, more accommodating reading spaces, and more different reading spaces, whether it's soft seating or like historic reading areas. So we're not looking for direct comment on the plans, but we're showing these so that you can keep them in mind when looking at the exterior elevations. So you can see if you were to kind of draw a line directly vertical from the turret, everything on the right of that is the new addition, and everything on the left is the historic building. So we're putting the majority of the collection within the lower level of the historic building. And we're also putting the meeting rooms, the small meeting rooms, and the teen lounge within that area as well. Excuse me. And then within the addition, we're trying to keep it kind of open and inviting, but it will have the like new books section and some reading spaces that are quite like ceremonial almost, and also a relatively large community meeting room with roughly 30 to 40 seats in it, as well as restrooms nearby, so that that can be closed off and used at night by patrons or by groups.
Andrew, if I could, I just want to
Yeah.
provide a little bit of context for folks, because this is obviously what we're proposing, but we refer to it as the 70s edition. It's actually oriented more diagonally because it's parallel to Common Road, and it kind of comes around and sort of engulfs the turret. So what we're trying to do, and this will become clearer once we show our landscape plans, we're trying to push the addition back so that that main expression of the original building is sort of re-exposed as a primary element of the composition.
Can I ask a question? So is there an open courtyard to the north of the collections on the top left there? There's like a light well.
Where
Sorry,
the
Adrian.
leaking roof is right now.
Oh, so that will actually be raised up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like it'll be a flat roof.
Okay. So it's a light
and it'll
bulb
bring light
together,
in. Yeah.
Yeah, but not an exterior space.
Yeah,
Just
right.
a way to get natural light.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Excuse me, sorry. And we're also, of course, putting a 3-stop elevator in, new staircase, new larger workroom, and kind of important back of house spaces. On the upper level, the addition will mostly support the entire children's library. So that will allow them to have separated program space from the rest of the library. So Chris will be able to do an enormous more kind of activities. She'll also have storage, or whoever the future children's librarian is will have storage and potentially an office, depending on how they like to use that space. And then the historic library will mostly maintain its original intention. There will be quiet reading space, there will be reference space. We are planning on putting the computer spaces within the back room, which is called the Whitney room, where the fireplace is. And then the historic lobby and the new entrance, or the original entrance will be brought back to its original state. So you'll be able to walk through the original front door again.
Andrew, do you mind clicking back to the lower level plan? I just want to make one other note for you all. Right now, for the lower level, it's actually up off the sidewalk by about 3 feet or so. And the floor to floor height from where you stand to the ceiling above you in the current edition is quite low. Kind of feels sort of compressed. So one thing that we're doing is we're actually proposing to lower this floor and bring it down closer to the sidewalk. So there's less steps and therefore less ramp needed to get you from the sidewalk into the building. And that will also give you more height once you're in the building between the floor and the ceiling. But what that means is that we need a ramp to negotiate those two levels, because the existing library basement or lower level would be about 1.5 feet higher than the new one that we're making.
So these were 4 schemes we looked at previously, and really what we were focused on the exterior is courtyard and gathering spaces near entries, and also how to negotiate grade. So as you all can imagine, there's a lot of grade change between Common Road and the historic entrance. And so some of these schemes looked at ways to ramp or slope up to that, scheme C and scheme D in particular on the bottom. The upper schemes have full handicap accessibility, but don't have a connection on site outdoors between the new lower entrance and the historic entrance. The reason why B and D have those circles is the feedback from the last meeting was that the sloped walk of B that gets you from the intersection of Crescent and Library Hill up to the historic entrance was the preferred scheme. And then scheme D, the courtyard layout that kind of embraces the building down at the lower level, was also preferred. Next, please. As I said, those were the 2 scheme pieces that were preferred. It was determined that we didn't need to eat up the slope with a long path that connects the upper and lower parts of the library. There was a desire for that lower courtyard to have lots of programmable space and potentially multiple activities at once, which that scheme D that kind of wraps the corner allows for that. We talked about the entrance to that lower space from the street and making sure that that was a little more narrow and more protected. And the idea that these new community spaces in the library should have a connection to an outdoor space right adjacent to them. So our current plan is this. And so you can see it's evolved a bit from the last time we were looking at it, and has a very simple sloped walkway from the intersection of Crescent and Library Hill Road that gets you without any handrails. So it's just a sloped walkway, gets you up to the historic entrance. We're also, you'll see later on in this show some pictures of the historic stairs at the front of the building, and we're making a nod to that with a gesture of a broad stair that steps you out to the street, that those also then become extra seats, places where people hang out. So it's more than just a stair. At the lower level, at the new entry, new addition, there is a plaza that has a couple different spaces that allow for benches and tables and chairs under trees. And in the top right of this, a little enclosed courtyard that space to the left is the community room. So there's direct spill out into that space.
Could I just point out that in case anyone isn't aware, that the original entrance with the arch is going to become the main entrance of the library. There may be people that aren't aware of that, but we're replacing what's now a window with doors again.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The trees that are kind of the darker greenier green, are those all new trees?
They are new, and we should have differentiated. The one the red bud is to the left there, right there.
That's existing.
That's the existing
Everything
red
else is
bud.
new.
Everything else is new. We actually were just looking out on site at some of the trees that are near the current parking, and we're going to investigate whether those can be given a wide enough berth in construction in order to keep them. The red bud we know is a much loved tree. It is a very mature, you don't usually see red buds that big, which is great. We do want to have an arboriculture assessment of that because it is old enough. And I was actually just looking at it before coming here. The bloom set's a little weak. We would love to keep it and frankly, do anything we can to help it along. But we kind of want a prognosis from an arborist. If they say, oh, this tree is gone, no matter what you do, we should know that now. So that's something that needs to come soon.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the courtyard on the, between the new addition and parking on the upper right, is that accessible from the outside or just from the inside?
Both, yeah. So there's a, where it says outdoor seating at the top, there's then the next space just below that has 3 trees in it, has some shrub layer to it and a little bit of a meander walk. And one of the reasons for that is that outdoor seating is a place for children's programming. And so without putting up a barrier or a gate, we're trying to make it a little harder to get kind of spilled out onto common roads so that a caregiver who's out there can say, you know, stay in this area. There's kind of clear demarcation, and it's a little more of a long journey for them for the 4-year-old runner.
There's a comment online.
Yes.
Ellen?
Thank you. I wasn't sure if it was the right time to ask specific on landscaping. I'm gonna vocalize something I've only lived here for 30 some years, and the head memorial garden that's in the front of the new wing. It's been managed by the garden club, but it is a hugely important thing to the longtime residents of Stowe and the history of Stowe. So I'm hoping that's in the plans. It seemed like there was some note on the garden club needs some space, but it's a specific history of the Head family that lost their children in a fire. So it's like a really important thing to continue. I just wanted to make sure that was included in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to learn more about that. So we'll figure out how to get that information about that. Great. Next slide. We just wanted to take a quick dive into some programming ideas so that people could get an understanding of the scale of these spaces. So the little things that look like ants are people from above. So, you know, children's story time, you have a cluster of kids in that back space with a couple of caregivers, and then still people coming and going to the entrance through the main part of the courtyard off of the street. If there was some sort of a book fair or event like that, there's an opportunity to set up tables, even some small, we call them farmers market tents, but the 10 by 10 standard tents. And that you could have quite a few people in there, or even on the right, an evening event where you could have cocktail tables, you could have music, you could have lighting, all in this space for a really nice event. So that just gives you a kind of some scale thoughts.
I had another question.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to put up any kind of horticultural barrier to reduce the noise from 117 in that space?
We don't particularly. The walls are low, and so you'll see over them. The plant material doesn't provide, it provides, obviously, it can provide visual barrier, but it doesn't provide audio barrier unless you have 100 feet of dense planting. So I don't think we can get sound protection. I think that we're trying to, by putting trees in these spaces, we're trying to create a nice canopy overhead that really gives you a sense of being in an outdoor room. And again, the walls, we don't want to make it feel kind of boxed in, so they're low and seat height, but they do provide a kind of clear demarcation that you're now within the library space as opposed to being out on the road. But we do not have anything with sound buffering in particular.
Can we just make some comments? feedback?
Tina? you're the chair.
Can we wait till the end? and
Okay,
then say-
I
yeah.
don't know what point. you're
Yeah.
gonna do
Next slide, please. Yeah, so and then parking, which is always a question. As everybody knows, there's very limited parking on site. Currently, we're trying to match the amount of parking that's there as best possible. It's still a little undetermined because the parking that's at the library right now is all kind of unsanctioned or not meeting kind of regulations for current parking spaces. So we're working through this with the town, whether what we're kind of allowed to do or not in terms of spaces. But there, just to show that there are still a number of different places we expect people to park. The spaces along Common Road, at the firehouse across the street, there will be parking to accommodate staff and some overflow. And then hopefully still the upper and lower spaces at the library. There will be, if at the lower spaces, there will be a handicap accessible space. If we're able to do the upper spaces on Crescent Street, there will be a handicap space there as well. And then the next plan is really just a hybrid of what you've heard from us and from Design Lab to see what those spaces are that are immediately inside and to see how there's a connection. So again, this community meeting room connection on the upper right, and then really the entrance to the building and seating areas that are in the pale green, that those really visually open up out into this entry and arrival plaza.
And just to add there, as Melissa pointed out at the beginning, this
You can move that.
this view, is kind of the primary view that most people are going to experience from the intersection and then coming up Library Hill Road into parking and approaching the building. So, what we've done here, and we didn't spend a ton of time talking about it when we were looking at the plans, but this is what we're referring to as sort of a community living room. It's kind of an informal gathering space with soft seating, some parts of the collection, very sort of welcoming first impression from the library if you were to enter from that new entrance. So kind of putting that sort of front and center and kind of anchoring that new corner and expressing that to the community as a new space to gather is an important gesture. We're going to switch gears, but perhaps if there's questions,
Did you have comments about this part, Andrew?
Yeah. just
Okay,
on the
yeah,
landscape.
yeah.
It's beautiful. Having visited your other collaborations before, the entrance and approach to the libraries can be so underrated in terms of how you feel and are welcomed in that. And to have places to sit and gather outside there are so important. And I know it's New England and people say it's too hot or too cold, but I think during the pandemic, everybody realized the value of outdoor space and the importance of being able to do things outside and hear the cars, the trees, the noise, anything out there. And as an investment in this, because I know sometimes landscape says, well, that's pretty expensive for pavers, but like, if you're comparing it to doubling the size of the community room, it's a great investment. And that was really visible in the library that you worked on together, where that room spilled into a space that was 3 times as big and felt like another extension of the room. So the program and activity that's going to get, and the hierarchy that you've got here with the big entrance plaza, that really brilliant kind of buffer zone before the children's area, and the spaces can be created by the trees. It's really nice.
Thank you.
Are you moving on to your part, the exterior? Because I just
Yeah,
wanted to talk
if
to,
there are no more.
I was just going to say, I think I have representatives from the Stowe Garden Club, if not the head family here. I thought maybe there might be some ideas tonight about where we could put that garden. I think it's that front garden to the.
Yeah, right to the
Right.
left as you're.
So I mean, in looking at this, in your expertise, is there a space, I'm not putting you on the spot, but like an idea of where it could possibly go?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple places we can think about, and just Ellen's comment had me already wheels turning. I think there are, so as you go up the steps to the historic entrance, that area on the left
Yeah.
with that walkway will really read as a garden. And so, that happens to be the accessible walkway, but it also becomes a nice kind of meander path. And I think that space, that could be one area that would be, could certainly use the TLC, I'm sure. The other area would be that small garden that we were talking about between the entry plaza and that outdoor seating by the community meeting room, that could be evolved. That would be probably over time a more shade garden. But there would be something nice about, that's a kind of, feels like it'll be a somewhat quiet space that's really, it has the wall that separates it from Common Road. I think that also could be developed as, a really lovely kind of named particular garden. So those would be the two areas I think that would be good for that.
Hi. Just looking to see if anyone has any comment on that.
Hi, I'm Diane Pelletier. I'm
Thank
president
you.
of the
Yeah.
show. And I'm not real good at looking at plans, but looking at the two areas, I'm bringing the feeling that's coming, it was set on my shoulders to bring to you, in that, looking to that side of the entry to the left gives us the same ilk that it has right now.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I can't envision size, space, and whatever, but is that location hot? Is it, I'm.
It will get good sun. It's a west. So it won't get early morning light, but it'll get midday and later daylight.
Okay,
So
I mean,
it's got a good.
It's essentially what was there
Yes.
before the tree
Yeah.
exploded.
Yeah. Correct.
Well, can you give me rough dimensions of that space?
Allison, help me, do you know?
So the walkways are 5 feet wide, so it's probably 3 to 5 feet wide on the triangle that's in between all the walkways. And then including the lower one, that one will get bigger, probably.
I mean, yeah, I would guess it is double the space that is now, that's in that kind of, and we can confirm that by overlaying this on the existing plan, but it's definitely bigger.
Okay, I mean, I don't think that's. Ooh, we don't. We got a lot of stuff in it. It's all
Yeah.
packed in there now.
Yeah.
After all these
I'll say
years.
someone was working on it just now, and yeah, it was looking great.
Yeah. I think Mr. Hyde has somebody working there for us for right now, just until we get through this.
Yeah.
The only thing I want to just bring up is, I personally think that would be, I don't know, I've got another member here with me also, but that would be my preferential place.
Great.
Only because that's where it was originally set.
Yeah.
And I think that people in town that unfortunately remember that would appreciate that. The plaque that is there is set in cement, so you and your wonderful machines will have to.
Right.
But I'm personally feeling, I've been in town 40+ years myself, but still not as long as some of the people remember that. And I think that would make my membership feel very comfortable and heard.
Great.
And for the heads, also.
Excellent.
So, I thank you for including
Yes,
us
no, excellent.
at whatever level, it
Great.
is.
No, that will, yeah.
Now, if may I ask one more question? I don't want to derail this. Those plants can be removed and should be removed because some of them are original.
Yeah.
Is there help that we can get with that, or how? When does that need to be done by? Because we can probably rally people to come and help us get what's there out. Obviously not the tree, but the.
Yeah, the other, I looked at you guys logistically for schedule. That would obviously, you'd want that stuff out right away before anybody steps foot anywhere near it. I think, we love to reuse material when we can. What's hard is given the duration of the construction project, that things being held out.
Well,
just
we
tend
do
to
have
not
a
make
place to
it.
put those plants
Well,
once they're done.
I was gonna say, so if you have homes for them.
We have a spot, so everything can go to one spot and be
Okay.
put in until we're ready to replant.
Okay. Great.
That works great.
That'll be-
It might be-
No offense to any contractors who are gonna be involved in this, but that'll be much better care by you all than it will by
The only
anybody.
thing is that because so many of those plants are so deeply embedded in there, many of us might not be able, if there was any way we could get any assistance.
Yes.
And we could be there as a.
I would think we should be able to do that, you know, there's gonna be other tree protection and, you know, site prep that happens. And most of it is perennial material and it's not a lot of shrubs if I recall. So,
Just a couple of small Judas.
Purposely changing.
That may or may not be worthy of.
Yeah. yeah,
But the perennial piece and the whole piece and things like that, I mean, it
Yeah.
needs to be done carefully, I mean, you can carefully as you can get it.
right, but in pieces and, yeah.
What happens to the crabapple tree? It's gotta go.
The crabapple tree in the wall and the path and everything going will have to go, unfortunately. I know it's at its beautiful moment right now too.
It
Of
is
course,
so
it
pretty
looks
right now.
perfect at this moment.
That's a show me tree too. Don't let your best go.
So I think we can, the construction team should be able to help get material out, and it would just be making sure that you all are notified and that can all be coordinated, yeah.
Only do so much.
Well, and we'll keep that. Like, when it comes to that time, so like write the kind of instructions for it, that will be part of it.
I mean, we may even be able to start piecemealing it, but I think if it's gonna get done, it should just get all done at once.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people there can just separate, put it in boxes, we
Yep.
can get it to where it needs to go, rather than trying to do it piecemeal, I don't know.
But there's also a timing, you don't wanna replant this stuff in November.
No,
Put a
but
new bed, you know, that's not gonna work.
we have a spot where it can go, a bed that can be torn up and made safe, and we'll do the best we can, like to do it in a timely fashion, but we can do that, it's just bodies, so people will have.
Right.
Maybe we can have a little assistance from the town. that we can
Yeah.
help.
I can coordinate that with the highway department
Thank
if
you,
we need to.
that would be fabulous, if we could get some good backs in there.
Yes, as long as someone's there overseeing the
Oh.
process.
Don't you worry about that, they'll have more overseers than workers.
And just really quick, since you asked the schedule, is, we're hoping, if all goes knock on wood, to be ready to go to bid in October of
Okay.
this year, with the hope of starting a construction project by the end of the year, or early 2024. So it's, if you wanna.
Yeah, so that's fine, so
Yeah,
if, I mean, it's gonna look ugly for.
Right.
But it's gonna look ugly anyway.
In terms of transplant seasons, it would be this fall, not next spring, likely, if everything goes well.
Plants in bed in October, November.
Well, if they're, well, I understand that, but we
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
knowing if we get a little tighter time frame when it's possible, we can hold it off as long as possible. We can get it earlier and get them, and it'll be ugly for a period of time, but as I
Yeah.
said, it doesn't matter. We could do that in early September and get them.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be best because just you get the best shot of really seeing and getting everything that's there. If we wait until mid-October, when things are dying back, you're likely to miss things.
End of August, it's September is when we can probably do that. And if somebody can just, I guess it would be let me know. Diane
Well,
comes here.
We meet with Denise and Tina every week, and so when it gets closer to that time and we're starting to get really ready to start moving, we'll definitely be notifying you.
If we get that, then we can get somebody to the place where we have to get it
Yeah.
torn up. I mean,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
get it in there. It's a Ruth Delmonico's house, some people don't work. That's what she's gonna take care of it for us.
Great.
So, and that way we can get them labeled and we can do what we need to do. And I really appreciate the fact that you've included us in a little bit of piece of it because it was really important for the town.
Yeah. Definitely.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, if we can shift gears, the intention now is to start looking at the exterior of the building. So we're going to walk you all through a little bit of our sort of process and the context of which has gotten us to this point, and then we're going to share some thoughts on the exterior character and composition. So to start, through this process, I mean, we actually began on this process nearly 2 years ago in the conceptual sort of feasibility study. We've tried to sort of immerse ourselves in the history and context of Stowe and what this community is and all about. Of course, like much of New England, it was mostly farm fields a long time ago, and there's remnants of that still now. And Randall, for the better part of 100 plus years, 125 years now, has really been a major, sort of historic, important building in the community. So that's all in the background of our thinking as we've been working through this process. And we know, on the next slide, Andrew, as many New England towns, there's a lot of buildings and residences and homes that have been around for a very long time as well. And that's part of our, in the background of our thinking. Keep going.
It's just, it takes a little while.
Yeah, this is delay.
So you all know Stowe. It's still very quite bucolic. It's quite wonderful. It's quite rural, and sort of the remnants of those farm fields and the orchards are very much inherent in the community. And it's just a really quite a beautiful place, surrounded by all of this sort of conservation land and nature trails, and like I said, the remnants of stone walls and farm fields and orchards. It's quite a wonderful place, and it's quite enriched by the nature that surrounds it. And at the same time, the community is also quite forward thinking, at least in our perception. Adopting or potentially code, being part of the coalition of green communities, thinking about renewable energy. So that's also wonderful to hear, and that's on people's minds, and that's kind of in the back of our heads as we've been working through this design process. So the site itself, you see the historic image of Randall up there in the middle. It's quite, perched quite eloquently, quite stately up on Library Hill. It was quite a prominent building at the time and still is. But since the 70s edition, it's sort of been, sort of consumed. The base of it's been consumed, and you don't really, see there's a little turret, peeking up there over the top of the 70s building. But that original composition has sort of been, frankly, a little bit lost, and as a result of the 70s edition. And the site's relationship across Common Road, to the town common and the War Memorial, that's a really important part of the site as well. And we really want to enhance that connection between library and common as part of this project. So that's something we've been thinking about. So just, it's fair to say that Randall could be architecturally characterized as a Richardsonian Romanesque building. Of course, H.H. Richardson was sort of the sort of godfather of that style. Trinity Church is perhaps one of his most prominent, if not the most prominent one of his works. But there's lots of examples of that style of architecture around New England, typically at perhaps a bit larger of a scale. Randall's a bit of a kind of little baby brother. It's quite modest in scale. It's sort of intimate. It's almost house-like. It's in its quality. But there's just some sort of key features of what it means to be of this architectural style and of this era. Very rusticated exterior, towers and turrets, sort of as an anchoring feature of a building. This notion of sort of verticality, but also this sort of horizontal banding, the pitched roofs. All of these things are kind of what makes the Richardsonian Romanesque buildings, part of a family. And Randall very much, fits within that. It checks most, if not all, of those boxes in its own way. It's got the turret at the corner. It's got this very big, prominent arched entryway. It's got a very clear vertical rhythm. If you kind of squint and look at the windows and the way they're spaced and their dimensions. So that's all sort of what we've been, working to understand about the existing building, because that's what's sort of informing our design process for this new addition. And we also, look broadly towards other guidelines and standards about how to approach designing, additions or enlarging historic buildings. So there's the Department of the Secretary of the Interior has a robust amount of information on this very topic, because they oversee so many historic buildings across the country. But one of the key takeaways for that is on screen here, and I won't read it word by word, but it basically says the addition or an addition to a historic wants to be compatible but not replicate what's there, so that the historic building, that sort of original gem can always be understood as what is original, and that the new addition should complement it and feel part of it, but yet distinct and not detract from what's there. So we just have an array here of sort of the key features of Randall, the turrets, sort of these tall windows, the primary materials of brick and slate and sort of copper, the nature of the spaces inside, what the sort of verticality that those tall windows create inside, those sort of larger volume spaces. All of that stuff is what we've been working on over the past several weeks and months to sort of understand and inform what we're proposing. So here's some overall guiding principles. We've been refining these as we go, as we collect feedback and sort of think about the design process, but this sort of summarizes what our design is trying to achieve. So like I just said, the addition should feel distinct yet complementary to the original library, and the addition in and of itself should feel like a gem, an architectural gem, but next to, of course, the original one. A very balanced composition, primarily of natural materials, stone and brick and other materials that sort of reflect what's in the building now. We want to amplify the library's presence on the town common. We think there's more of an opportunity to create a connection between the common and the library through the site and the way the building sits on the site. The composition should take cues from the defining elements of the original building, like I just talked about. We want to create a distinct, you'll see this in a moment, but what we refer to as sort of a gasket between new and the new addition in the old building, so that there's a little bit of a kind of breathing room between the two. And that overall, the character of the addition, should feel as if it's part of the broader context of the community. You want to talk about these, Andrew?
Sure. So along the same line, like at the same time as kind of creating these goals as a group, we've also been working through the design in a more tangible way than just goals as a word. We've also created some highlights. So biggest one probably, like right from the start, the library should be as accessible as possible. That's why there's a ramp on the interior, there's the ramp on the exterior, there's a 3-stop elevator as well, and that's why we're lowering the addition floor so it's right on the sidewalk. And it just creates the most open, accessible, inviting entry. Also the separate entrance for the community room and the community room in general. It starts to inform the exterior just by that program really existing. A dedicated teen space. We all kind of chose together as a group and voted on advancing at the time what we were just calling massing option 4, but you'll see that in a moment. There should be an exterior terrace off the children's library. And the community living room should have a double height space right at the arrival moment. As well as, of course, adequate or above adequate support spaces and custodial spaces.
So as Andrew and Ben have both mentioned, we were really looking at how we can take the mass of the existing building and start to look at how our addition will so looking at how the mass of the addition would interact with the original building. And so as we worked through that, we started to come up with these 4 schemes that we have here that really start to take the overall building, our addition, and start to break it up into 3 distinct volumes, including a gasket space, as Ben mentioned, and then 2 volumes that face more towards Common Road. And so massing number 4 is the one that separates the 3 of them the most and creates a distinct, just 3 distinct volumes there.
Yeah, and just so you can just understand what those volumes are. So So the kind of primary volume, the main volume of the addition, this is what we're referring to here. So it's very clear that's new, it's distinct. This is the gasket that we've been referring to, which will make a little bit more sense once we go through a few more slides, but we want to try to touch the existing building as lightly and delicately as possible before we kind of get bigger again. So that's what we refer to as the gasket. And then the third volume is
We're about to get a lot of light bulbs.
and then the third volume is sort of tucked around the back, which you were seeing in plan, but that's a community room volume. So we want that to be able to kind of be clear as you know, that's an orienting device. That's a space that people will be able to recognize from the exterior and just help people understand the overall organization of the addition.
Can I ask a question? I just don't, I can't envision how it sits on the site. It looks like it's going into the road. I mean, I can see
Yeah,
the
yeah, we've got a
elevation.
little model for you. So we can just.
Did anybody else want?
So Common, this is Common Road.
Okay,
Library Hill Road is here, coming
Yeah.
down to the intersection, which is just about here. The church is the phone. So what's different is that previously, the 70s
Excuse me,
edition.
Ben, are you able to turn it a little bit more? I think more folks want to be able to see
oh,
it.
sorry.
So the 70s edition now sort of comes out here. It's parallel with Common Road.
Right.
So we're pushing it back, which allows all of this to be this sort of landscaped entry plaza. And it also sort of reveals the turret again. So hopefully, does that help?
It does help, thank you. It's just pushing it back
Yeah.
is what.
And again, this is the community room
Yes.
section, and then with the hip roof, that's the rest of the new addition.
Thank you.
And with the landscape, we're going to dig down and expose more of the turret. So
Yeah, I
you'll be able
mean,
to see it.
There are
again.
windows covered up down
Yeah.
there.
so-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there are.
That's right. So we're the grading around the turret will be as close to what you see in those historic pictures as possible, so that it, has more.
You and your
prominence on
collision
site,
loss.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking.
So in our previous meeting, we had voted on, or the committees voted on moving forward with massing option 4 that really starts to separate the 3 volumes. And so what we've been doing recently is playing with what the cap or the roof, what we're calling the cap, how that geometry starts to shift and change, and how that can then relate to the existing roof with the asymmetrical ness of the existing roof versus also looking at like the slope and calling that over to our addition.
Yeah, just so people who are looking at the screen. So what Audrey, one thing that, so we're exploring this, and this is part of the feedback that we'd like to get from everybody tonight. This version that we looked at the last time we met with the exterior building committee, it felt a little too symmetrical, the roof did. The existing composition, which is one of the fundamental things of a Richardsonian building, is there's a symmetry, but the overall composition is asymmetrical. There's symmetrical moments within it, but overall it's an asymmetrical composition. It's all very balanced and composed, but this was feeling a little too static and a little too, just a little too symmetrical in and of itself. So it's a minor thing, but we're starting to explore ways in which the roof and the pitch of the roof might help create more asymmetry.
Is that a triangular plane, MC, or trapezoidal, stretched out trapezoid, is that what that is?
Yeah,
There's a bottle of it's down here. if you
yeah.
want.
some of it's there.
Actually, you can look right here. That's where I used to see right here. That was your
And
cap too.
we have more imagery. We
Yeah.
have way more imagery. coming up, so,
Let us keep going through it, but this idea of, we're referring to it as the cap, the cap or the roof of the main volume. It's something that we'd like some feedback on tonight.
And I think before we, we'd like to kind of get through everything before we start discussing all of them, because there's kind of a lot. And we have it set up to kind of get feedback in a way that we would like, just so that we don't go off the rails a little bit, right? Like we've done a lot. We're looking for feedback about very large items, but also somewhat specific items that we'll get into. So that's why we want to wait till the end. So it's all kind of comes together and we can discuss it as a group.
And so kind of these next few sets of slides will really take you through how we got, like, how we took the components that Ben has talked about with like of the existing building and the vertical windows and then the horizontal banding and those datums. And so how we took those components and started to add those into our addition. And so looking at the verticality of those windows, we started to bring that rhythm over into where we'll then start playing with it. And then the gasket that was mentioned, which will help to break up where we touch the original building to give some visual break in the elevation. So it's not slammed right into the original building. And then another big important piece of this is there is a base to the original building. It's small and a little bit of it is hidden on the turret right now, but we wanted to also bring that component into what this new addition would be. And then taking note from the horizontal banding across the original, we're starting to bring some of these lines over and then resonating with other parts of the building. And then this is really how we're breaking up our addition. So when we refer to things like the cap, we're talking about the roof, and the base, we'll look at the different heights of the base and how that can relate to the original building.
And the space in between is sort of the feel. So, sorry, these chairs. When we talk about the base a lot, we're talking about the cap a lot, and then we're talking about the feel, which is sort of like what's in between. So you guys saw the plans earlier, and we wanted to, before we like talk specific architecture, I mean, this is sort of setting the stage for, you know, the sort of vertical rhythm and some of the datums we're thinking about and how the composition might start to come together. But we just wanted to provide you with the context of like, what are the key program spaces that are happening on the other side of the wall, because those very much inform, you know, the nature and the quality of the wall and the level of transparency, and we want, you know, some of what's happening inside to be expressed outside to create that sort of connection and sort of that orienting device. So at the primary corner, we've got this, what we're referring to as a community living room. It's like what you'll walk into. You know, circulation desk will be there. There'll be some, you know, browsable part of the collection. There'll be soft furniture. It'll feel very comfortable and welcoming, and that's sort of anchoring the building on the corner. Children's library is up above. There is staff workspace on the lower level, sort of tucked behind the circulation desk in the addition. And then sort of back behind, sort of set back behind the primary volume is where that community room is here with more children's space above it. So in plan, you know, we want all of these things are also helping us define how the building is composed and what it looks like. You know, we're taking cues from the original historic building, but we also need to take cues about what's happening inside to help knit everything together. So it's this, you know, identifying the entry and the sort of key moment in this view out and in, and kind of creating that connection to parking and the common and in the intersection. That's important. Identifying that community room, and then there's the sort of nature of that sort of gasket condition in plan that we're also expressing in elevation. Is that helpful? Kind of set the stage for all the different components. And here's just a sort of smattering of sort of architectural inspiration of you know, different types of spaces, of, you know, how, you know, little small windows can create important moments within a building. In that case, a children's room. You know, larger openings can help frame a view. In this instance, there can be skylit conditions to create natural light from above, or there can be larger expanses of glass that actually open up, and they can create sort of direct indoor-outdoor connections. That's what Andrew was referring to earlier. You know, for the community room, when weather permits, you could open that up and you could have a very nice indoor-outdoor event and kind of create an extension create an extension of an event that's inside, but out into a kind of landscape patio setting. So we started to think about, a material palette. What are the materials that we want to be thinking about as part of this new library or the addition to Randall? All hopefully sort of mostly natural materials. Stone as part of the base, perhaps masonry, slate tile at the roof, on the cap, or maybe even on the, on the walls in some capacity. Moments of glass to create those connections indoor and outdoors and let natural light into the building and views out of the building. Could be wood siding. Obviously clapboards are sort of classic New England material, so that may be something that we start to include. And then what we have here, we're noted as sort of composite boards. Those are sort of fiber cement type panels that create a cladding condition. Those can be arranged in any number of ways and configurations and colors to help create an overall composition on the exterior. And then just some overall photos of exterior compositions of our work. That's the Concord Museum you see there. This is the West Branch Library that we mentioned earlier. Some of our other work for colleges and universities in New England. But we're always, trying to, take cues from the natural context that the buildings sit within.
These are just some, the equivalent on the landscape side, thinking about the quality of some of the spaces that we'd like to see. You can see in the top row, some images of courtyards with trees at varying levels of maturity, but trees really can create that canopy overhead that creates a ceiling, so it really makes a space into an outdoor room. On the upper right-hand corner, West Branch Library, that is the historic entrance and steps, and wanting to revive that gesture here. And then just some other courtyard spaces along the bottom.
So you're on the next slide, you're about to see a rendering for the first time of like the exterior of the building. But this slide, we've kind of ghosted out the building because we want to be focused on what's in the foreground, the landscape. And then in a couple slides, we're gonna let the landscape fall away and we'll talk about the building. So you'll see the kind of building in the background here, but I just want to.
Until done with mirrors.
Yeah, it's
Because we'll never let the landscape fall away.
No, they work very closely together. Absolutely.
This is that view from kind of the corner of Common Road and Library Hill Road, looking back at everything. You'll see the low walls that start to define this entry courtyard space in these gathering places. Just to note, in this rendering, it's shown as being perhaps a brick. We really are going to take cues on this wall from what the base of the building becomes, because really the wall is an extension of the base of the building, and how it hits the building is really important. So that material is still as much in conversation as everything on the building. But you can see this tree canopy. We're showing trees at a, maybe 5 to 10 year out phase. So they'd be a little smaller than this at install, and over time would get much bigger. Maybe that's it for what I have on this. Oh, it's me
One
next
more
too.
slide.
Yes.
Quick, maybe that was
And just to start thinking, we are starting to pull together ideas for plant palette. Nothing is set in stone yet, but I think the existing red bud would call for some companions out there. We'd love to introduce some more red buds. Honey locusts are a wonderful courtyard tree. We have black tupelos, a scarlet oak, and a sassafras are all possibilities for shade trees out there. A shrub layer will keep kind of low because we want this visibility to the building, but a fothergilla, a low growing sumac, a low bush blueberry, and a repandent yew, which stays on the small side. And then thinking about a ground planes, we want some really hardy ground covers out there. That's a barren strawberry, and where we have shade, getting some ferns going. And then talking about some of the open spaces like on the slope, whether that is lawn or maybe whether it's a meadow or things that we're still talking about. So.
So next, we're gonna move on to the building. And what we're gonna show here isn't, we have three options, but it's not choosing between three options. We're gonna look at 4 different elements on all 3 options. And that's what we're looking for feedback on, is we're looking for feedback on the shape of the cap and the window arrangement and the materials, as well as the size of the base. And all of these things, we're gonna take all of your feedback and then we're gonna put it back together. So don't look at all of these as like kind of holistic choices that you have to make. We're just looking for feedback. We're not gonna vote on one of these 3 choices. This process is not done yet, basically. There's way more than 3 choices. And we just want to see how you feel about the cap shape, the window arrangement, and the materials and the base size, and kind of overall feelings in general. But it's just really important to understand and kind of guide your voices in these 4 directions. So the first option, which we're calling tall base and punched openings, it has a tall base and it has punched openings, but it also it has the symmetrical cap that we've discussed at our previous meetings. But a key point here is that you see they're very tall windows that actually break the datum of the cap. And on the double height space from the previous program diagram, those windows are not double height. They're broken up in the middle, so there's slightly less glass in this option.
Good, Andrew. Yeah.
And so in this option, we've put slate on the cap, and that slate actually turns down onto the side, and the base extends all the way up to meet that material, which is roughly at the same height as the original what we call water line on these historic buildings. And we have a brick base in this, but the brick isn't laid in a traditional kind of running bond. It's actually laid like 45 degrees because we don't want to exactly mimic the existing material. That's not really kosher, especially in the eyes of the Secretary of the Interior. And then you can see the gasket, of course, separating that no matter what. So these will not be smashing together.
When you're concerned about the cap looking too symmetric, are you talking about to the roof on the left, or just at?
Click back a slide, Andrew,
Yeah.
because I think that, so in this instance, Melissa, it's just,
Okay,
this is quite asymmetrical. You know,
Right.
There's symmetrical moments within it,
right,
but this feels
Yeah.
just a little
Yeah.
too strong as a symmetrical gesture,
okay.
which is why in some of our other options, we're looking at the sort of different angles for that roof that kind of pick up on cues in the existing roof lines. The other thing I wanted to mention, this part of the building here, it's pushed back. So if you click forward on the next slide, just want to make sure that people understand that. So we got a little diagram here. When you look at the elevation, you're seeing this volume as volume A. Does that make sense? And
Yes.
volume B, you're seeing this elevation, but it's pushed back quite a bit. So this bit there is, sort of further back from A.
Yeah.
So that's just, it's important to think about as you look at these, because even though everything looks flat, it's an elevation, that's kind of how they work, that's pushed back. The other thing I want to make, just nomenclature, punched openings, it's kind of like a typical window in a house, like it's as if it was punched through the wall. It's not a huge, large, expansive glass, they're kind of punched through the wall, as opposed to.
Yeah.
And then in this view, you're also seeing what Andrew was suggesting, where these windows, which in this instance would be part of the children's room, sort of tuck up and kind of become part of the roof plane as sort of like a dormer type condition. So we'll go through,
We have-
we've got two others that we'll go through like the same type of images, and then we can kind of talk about them all together.
So in the next strategy, which we're calling vertical corner, the biggest difference, and there's many if you really dive into it, but the big differences here are a lower base. So it doesn't really compete with the existing base as much. But it also has double height windows at that double height corner. And on the cap, instead of breaking that datum, we're putting sloped windows. So again, you have to consider the interior spaces here. So we have much smaller windows right at the floor level of that upper level, which we're thinking would be similar to those nooks that we showed in previous pictures. So you can imagine like a nook and then a skylight above it with a bookcase in between. But when we're starting to use our imagination a little too much. So we also, in this option, we're showing a metal roof with a similar colored field, but a different material. Here, the material is composite board, like Ben described. We're showing two options for the composite board. And we're just showing that because we're not, just choosing this one composite board. There are millions and millions of composite boards that we would end up looking at, and similar to kind of all these materials. There's whole trees of colors and types and sizes and stuff. And then the base in this option is a concrete base. So next slide is rendering. You can see here that the kind of verticality comes out a lot more. And that's because we're trying to break up the field a little bit with some vertical lines that actually push out from the kind of flat surface of the elevation. And our third option is the sloped roof with a dormer. And you'll see a few similar things from the last one. It's a shorter base. It also has the double height windows at the corner, but it has taller windows on that left side of the elevation. And it also has a wide dormer. So this is kind of the only option that has a ribbon window, if you will. Similar materials, but here the base is stacked stone, but here actually the roof and the field are the same, so it wraps all the way down to a lower base.
One thing I just want to point out, because we didn't specifically talk about this elevation, I'm sorry for that, we should have. This elevation is looking this direction. So this primary elevation is looking this way. This one is sort of looking at it from the other corner. So you're starting to see the community room here and the expression of the sort of double height space at the corner. And what's interesting, and another thing that's been in the back of our mind is, can we make some sort of gesture to the proportion of the turret in our composition? We didn't come with any schemes with an actual turret. We're just kind of hinting at the turret in the proportion of our windows, but all of this matters because it wants to feel sort of cohesive and of one, yet sort of distinct.
Is the roof angled on the edition, on this version?
It is.
Yes.
Yeah, and that,
The roof is- Oh, yes.
that angle, we're picking up from points on the existing composition, so it's an angle that actually exists. It's a slope that exists on the existing building. But this is the one of the scheme where we started to explore, like, what if we didn't have a like perfectly symmetrical roof. But as Andrew said, like this is one iteration. We're gonna go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and we'll kind of build upon this. But all the different components from the different schemes are kind of what we're looking for feedback on.
And it's also important to, of course, remember that this isn't done. And with that in mind, there are things here that we're not asking for opinions yet on, like the vestibule and the backside of the building, because these 4 things that we're trying to get feedback on, we think will drive the rest of these decisions and will help us in the future kind of complete this building. But these are really important elements that are really driving forces for the design. of the entire building and how it complements the existing. So we just have a few slides that are, I guess, a reminder slide, cap shape, window arrangement, materials, and base size. The materials goes across all three of those objects. So we have a few slides just comparing them. But I think now is when we would love some feedback, right? So I'm just gonna check my slides. Yeah, this is it.
Feedback now.
I guess I'll start. Because of the way my brain works, I go toward what I'll call the flat, right? The flat roof,
Number one?
number one
Yeah.
or number two.
Right.
But I get the more I look at it, I like the sloped roof.
I think also with the sloped roof, so we had our whole office come together and we showed 12 of these or something, like we had way more of them. And the sloped roof was the most contentious, I think. And like we talked about a lot, like why, where, and when. Everybody had their own opinions, but it's also important to understand that the slope isn't coming out of just the blue. Like the slope is drawn from, remember not to touch the screen this time, from this corner to this corner is the exact same slope as the existing roof. And we looked at options of whether the gasket kind of becomes a valley or whether the gasket becomes a ridge. So if this were to be reversed instead, so it's not just a random shape that we threw on. It's all driven from the existing context.
For the cap, I understand what you're saying about the symmetry, because somebody said too modern for this, but the historic building, when it was built, was very modern. It was extremely innovative, and it was American, and it said no to classical symmetry that this building is modeled after in the old kind of traditional thing with the columns and everything. And it's like, this is America and everything. And then, like in 1893, there was an architectural exhibition that changed everybody's opinion of what American was, and everything looked like the post office for 75 years until World War II. So I think the symmetry that it had, especially when you saw the model, it was so centered, and your brain goes towards symmetry, right? You're drawn towards it. That detracts from the primacy of the historic building, especially without all the windows. Now we see the windows being asymmetrical. I think they're in dialogue with each other. So I get the idea of doing the slanted roof. I also get that it's contentious, because when I saw it blank, I'm like, that doesn't work. And I love slanted roofs. And I said, I hope when they show the program that there's something about what's going on the inside that starts to inform it. And that is starting to happen here. Because if you look at the historic building, there's like a big thing, and then there's a long thing and a tall thing. All these things going in different directions. It's not symmetrical. It's going up, down, left, right. But there's still a hierarchy to it. And the windows in the first one are starting to work for that. I think that verticality. I'm concerned about those in the children's room because they're west facing, and I feel like the blinds are gonna be down 90% of the time because the sun's gonna be coming in for after school programs. But I like the idea of something like that, the roof coming up. So, and it reminds me of they did really well in Lincoln or Concord, sorry. So the dormer is starting to do it, starting to go in the right direction, but I think it's something that you could explore more for the cap. So I think and when you see it in perspective too, I feel like it's more in dialogue with the existing building. So I think there's something there, yeah, but needs some study. But I would say not so much. For the base, did you mention that the base would take a cue from the base of the building? Now I'm actually wondering if it should take a cue from the War Memorial that it's reaching out towards, which is directly across the path, which I think is granite, and it's a rough and smooth hewn granite. And that might be a really nice way to connect those, and in a way, not just extend the library, but extend the War Memorial language in that direction. So I don't think that has to be part of the base. for the options for the base, what is the actual masonry base of the historic building? What material is it and what is the cut?
We think it might be granite, we're not sure.
Right, it's buried.
It's buried,
Yeah.
There's black and white images.
Right.
That's the best of our knowledge right now.
So we'll find out.
Yeah.
I think for the top one, having, almost feels like postmodern upside down building. It feels like the base is on top and the bricks on the bottom. So I don't know if that's, I know kind of what's happening, but I'm not sure it's reading that way. So I like having a base of some kind, and I guess we'll kind of start with
A lower.
yeah, the lower base, yeah. So I think the base into stepping down. I think that tends to work.
Oh, you have a hand up online? You wanna answer that one first?
You can go first, it's fine.
So I'll just, I don't like the sloped top at cap at all. It, like you, I mean, I want it to be a little bit symmetric. And it just reminds me of the 1975 edition. Don't want to be reminded of that. So, but I understand about wanting to break it up, and I think either the first or the second, I think I like the top with the dormer windows better, although skylights are a good idea. I don't like the tall base. I like a shorter base. I agree that, I mean, just needs to have like 3 sections instead of the 2 butting up against each other. The idea of when you were talking about children in the windows space, windows in the children's space, I liked the picture you show with the little windows. I think kids would love to have little kid-sized windows, and they would think that would be really special. So maybe that's a way to not have too much sun coming in
That's what, I think option 2 is showing that.
on the back.
pretty well.
Well,
Yeah.
it's,
Those windows might be like kind of below adult eye height.
and I'm concerned that the windows in the original building are dark, and the windows in the new building would be very light. And I think it's gonna make the original building look dark and gloomy. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I mean, the frames with the glass.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the frames or if it's the glass, but something about those original windows might look very dark compared to the style of the new windows. And I don't know, because I don't know what you're talking about, but do you get the idea? I mean, I don't want the new addition to make the old building look gloomy and dark and eerie.
The way the glass is rendered on the addition, all the
Yeah,
elective glass, and I don't, maybe that's just a style of rendering, but the
Yeah,
old
I'm not
building
sure,
looks
but
like that it's
I just
not.
want to point out that by making, there could be an issue if the new windows look too bright compared to the original windows.
So the original building is masonry, the windows are set back pretty deep.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
so
think they're probably at least 8 inches off the face.
There's gonna be a bit more of a shadow line for
Yeah.
the original windows, but when we want, when glass in buildings looks best, it's kind of the dusk evening hours where it's starting to illuminate the building. And I think we're gonna be replacing the lighting holistically throughout, old and new, so that we can improve the quality of light in the existing building, so that in the evening hours, it's shining out in the same way that it would be out of the addition.
But what about in the daytime? I mean,
Well, in the daytime, I think we'd like to, I don't think we're thinking reflective glass, but we haven't really got there. I mean, we're thinking about a clear transparent glass. But I think there is a bit of a shadow line in the existing building, so it's gonna be hard to frankly adjust, just based on
Right.
where the windows sit within the openings.
But I think it's also important to kind of understand that the medium that we're looking at, we have the windows as gray blue, and they're not going to be, but it's to show where the windows are and
Right.
to just bring them out a little bit so that we make sure to look at them. But also when we get more into the construction documents, we're gonna we're gonna dive into the window details and the setbacks of the windows and the type of glass and all of that. And we're probably do the same thing that we did here, where we're constantly going back to the existing building for context and to see how these things actually compare to each other and whether it does operate as a complement or not.
I do like in the top, I don't like the full length windows. I like the way they're broken up on the top, even though I don't like the base looking like it's butting up to the roof like that. But I like the breakup of the windows on the top.
Okay, Alexis, you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi. Can you see me?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I don't get the full view. I wanted to just thank everybody for their hard work on this. I live on Old Bolton Road. And I just had a couple comments and then a couple questions too. So I really liked to see that you recognize like the importance of the natural light. I think that there's something kind of, I have little kids, there's something kind of magical about the current kids' room. It might be leaky, but it's really nice to go in on a rainy day and just have those like big skylights, kind of just like takes you away a little bit, which is nice in a library. And I'd like to see that you had sort of like the patina from the existing like gutters as part of your sort of palette, because I think I really like the juxtaposition of that with the brick color. So I think it'd be nice to try to kind of capture that moving forward. On the sort of reference projects that you had with like the Concord Museum and the West Branch Library, I prefer like the West Branch Library and the other one that was on the right that have sort of that like very modern, like kind of boxy, like very light, like visually light addition. I think like it helps the historic part of the building really shine. So that was one of the questions I had, was whether you considered any alternatives that like just, I guess, incorporated maybe like more of that metal, like that sort of like the casement metal that's around those skylights on the existing children's room. I saw you had like the metal roof on, I think, one of these, but I was just curious if you could like say a little bit more about sort of like the choices to not lean as modern with the addition. So that's one question I have, is whether you thought about just sort of like a boxier, more linear addition rather than sort of these like angled roof lines. And then another question I had was if you thought about anything that kind of like echoes that front like center gable that's over the existing, I guess what is going to be the new main entrance, that like peaked roof that's in the front, and whether you thought about something that kind of like carries that forward more as opposed to these sort of like flatter or sloped roofs. And then the last question I had was whether you thought about anything that would like at all like reference the arch shape. And I think that was it. I might have more like specific comments that I'll just probably send in an email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Where to start? So thank you, first of all, for the thoughtful feedback and comments. In terms of the addition and I guess the materials, we haven't I guess ruled out sort of metal as a potential cladding material, though we are shying away from it a little bit from a cost perspective. We were exploring copper as a potential cladding, or zinc or some other natural sort of metal in earlier stages, but we shied away from it mainly from a cost perspective. Though some of the precedent images that we showed for materials that we're considering, those composite fiber panels, those sort of cementitious panels, like some of those have a finish that looks very similar to metal, and that's something that we've been thinking about as a potential strategy. In terms of the roof form, we did, leading up to tonight, in our previous meeting, we did look at a volume that was completely a flat roof. And our feeling at the time was, because the roofs on the existing historic building are so strong and so prominent, they're quite steep, and there's almost as much roof as there is building, that it made our sort of flat roof scheme just feel like in complete juxtaposition with the original building in not a good way. It seemed to be too much of a departure from the original building, and there just was a sort of conflict between the two. So that's why coming in this evening and why we looked at different massing models in our last meeting, why we've kind of started to dial in on some form of a pitched roof. But clearly we're not fully resolved on that yet. And then your questions about the arched entry and sort of the gable, we had considered that actually in earlier schemes. We didn't actually bring any to the table where we were proposing to bring the arch into the composition of the new addition. It didn't feel quite right. It felt like a bit too much of a copy and paste, but we are very intrigued with sort of representing the proportion of the turret somehow in our composition of exterior materials. So but we mentioned that maybe perhaps too quickly, but that's the thought process in our mind about how the materials in the addition could be composed to pull the turret into the composition.
And the arch question, which is it's a great question. It is something that like we always look at. Obviously, I mean, we're always looking at images like this, and the arch is front and center, especially now that you can see the front of the building. But it's important to remember that the intention of the arch is to create an inviting front entrance. That was the original concept from Richardsonian Romanesque. And so it wasn't just about the arch, it was really, that was the product of the times and the materials they had. And like reactions to previous styles and so on and so forth. And so we're considering that our addition entrance will have a ceremonial kind of vestibule entrance that's part of the landscape, like procession and so on. But a direct response to the arch, we just don't know whether that's the right answer yet or not. And that goes back to my previous point that we're going to let some of this other stuff drive forward, kind of take the first step, and then we can take steps with these more detailed items.
Lisa?
I like number 3, is in the way that you described it, that the outside of the field is matched on the cap. Can the cap be a dark color? Can the cap echo the dark of the original buildings? Whether it's slate or not isn't necessarily critical, but can the color sort of be carried across the new building?
Like I like the dual color of the top.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, it could. Very, very well could. Yeah.
I think that would create the dialogue that we're looking for, especially from this corner view that you pointed out at the very beginning, because now you can see the turret. It's a bigger feature in the future than it is now.
I would like to see the same color, whatever the cap looks like, whatever shape the cap is. I think it would be nice if it was the color of the original roof.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm relieved that you brought in an option that was not that, what to me looks like a man-started roof. And I've been thinking in the last 3 weeks how to express what I don't like about it. And it reminds me of a hat pulled down over someone's head that feels like it's closing out the world, or at least the town.
Yeah.
And whereas I wanted something more uplifting. So I'm really glad that you've got other options. And I like the material of the cap and the bottom one being carried down through the building a lot, actually, and whatever it is. I don't think I want it to be brick. I wouldn't mind if there was very little brick in the new part of the building, because it's so hard to, that brick in the old building is particular, and brick is hard to duplicate. And I don't think you're gonna get colored mortar again, right? So anyway, that I just wanted to express my thanks to you for that. Because I wasn't sure what you'd come in with.
No, I like that. Yeah. I like
And in terms of the base, the top one, I don't like it's sort of like you flip the color scheme. So that what you're calling the base is basically the whole first level of the addition. And to me, it's too tall. I know it carries on the line of the base of the original building, but it doesn't, I can't express it. I just don't like it, you know. Sorry, not giving you a better reason, but, and I think that's all I have to say at the moment.
Any opinions on the windows?
There are elements of all three that I like. I like I like the little nookie windows. I imagine they're like under here, right?
Yeah,
They're down floor level. And I think that's terrific. And I think what I don't like about that second one is that if more of this, you know, if the glass came down further, above from the skylight. That's in fact, so like the top one, maybe if we're half as tall. Coming from the, okay. I'm not articulating myself very well, I'm sorry.
You have
Kate-
a couple people
oh,
here too. that-
Okay, I'm gonna take Caitlin online. Hi.
Hi there. I'm on my cell phone, so I can't see everything, but thank you everyone for this great presentation. There's clearly been a lot of thought put into it, and it's an exciting project for the town. I like the third roof option as well with the angle. I agree with the last gentleman who was speaking with the roof looking like a cap hat on option 1 and 2, and I like that the slight slant plays off of the existing building, but I think I prefer having the contrast between roof line and building, so kind of matching the existing in that area. I like in terms of windows, I like option 1 a lot. I like how it breaks up the roof line, but it's almost like a combination of 1 and 2 where it breaks up the roof line, and then you have the little like nook windows for kids. I have young kids as well, and you know, they like those little secret spots. But yeah, so those were my initial thoughts, but I think it's exciting to see the progress you guys have all made, and exciting to see how this will evolve over time. So thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Diane?
Sitting here knowing nothing about architecture, only what you like to and can appreciate. If you appreciate nature, you can pretty much appreciate everything else. But when I look at that first one, I say, now my library is showing up. It's there. And that the library in that one seems to me to be the one that's saying, hey, we're here, and this is my friend over here that it's grown up with me now, it's catching up.
When you say, oh, you're talking about the old building?
Yeah,
Oh.
that, I just think that one sets it aside from everything else, and it says that we're gonna be friends. And that's what it looks like. I mean, it just really does, and I love all kinds of architecture and everything, but for this town and for that placement, that angled roof, I can see why people are really impressed with it and like it, but I think our old library likes that other roof. And I have to leave, but I just want to say thank you very much for hearing me tonight and understanding that we need a spot that's going to be important, and with your help, and we will take care of the flowers. And thank you very much for all of your work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Helen.
Hi, thank you, Helen.
I like the first one. I like the windows, particularly on the right-hand side. I like that they're broken up. The bottom 2 make me, and this might be a cohesiveness, I don't know. It reminds me of the cafeteria and gym at Center School. But it also feels like if I'm driving down 117, those bottom 2 make me feel like glass. Welcome to glass in Stowe. I'm sorry. I know you put a lot of work into it, that's the impression I get, but I like the top one because it breaks it up a little bit and it's warmer. That's the impression I have. I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
No,
No, that's why we, this is why we
I
did
realized
it.
how strong I was.
Kathleen?
Again, thank you for all the wonderful hard work. I kind of like the first one as well. I like the fact that the windows are broken up. It's not the continuous column glass from first to second floor. My first impression was that I thought the base was gonna be too heavy. The tall base was gonna be too heavy. The more I look at the drawings, maybe not. And, you know, I really don't like the third one, but I'll take the second. I think just so much tall skinny glass, masses of tall skinny glass doesn't seem right. And Diane whispered to me earlier that she really liked in the first drawing that the narrow windows seem to mirror the narrow windows on the turret, and it looked great.
Yep.
You know, it's her comment.
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Nancy online?
Hi, just a few overall questions I have. This might be my planning board self coming out, but I'm concerned about the residence that is just across from the proposed outdoor patio space, where, like you showed, you could have a book fair or fundraising event, whatever. I mean, their yard and the home is right there. What are the setbacks you've looked into, or is there any screening being considered?
So, yeah, we met with zoning on Friday, I believe. And the next door neighbor is actually on the other, what's the name of that street? Crescent is on the Crescent Street side, and the courtyard is on the Common Street side.
Right, but his yard extends, you know, and extends back.
Yeah.
You know, like the green space you're showing to the right doesn't really exist like that. Those are the two homes' yards. So I just wondered, having events and stuff out on a patio directly adjacent to the property. I just wondered if you've considered
I think we
anything.
need to consider it more. I don't think
Yeah.
we've gotten there yet in our thought process, but we're very aware of our proximity to the neighbors, and we'll likely think about some sort of planted buffer there to help
Okay.
separation.
And the wall does increase to probably 3 feet along that backside too, so between the site wall and some planting.
Right, I'm just thinking there has to be a setback, like the wall can't be right on the property line. So I just don't know how that affects it. My other question is, I thought there was a slide way in the beginning with some text in it, or I've read it somewhere, that you're considering asking for Library Hill Road to be made one way. Is that right?
No.
Good, okay.
Common Road.
The one that, oh, you want Common Road to be one way. I swear it said the other one. Okay. Great. And my other question is there a plan to reuse the granite front steps that are currently there or incorporate them somewhere? I just think that's such a valuable material. I wonder if we are reusing it somewhere there.
We haven't gotten into that level of detail yet, but
Okay.
granted, it's something that we're looking at for all sorts of site features, so.
Great.
we'll keep
All
that
right,
in mind.
and just two quick ones. The historic original attic that's in the original building, I've been up in it. It's really cool. You've probably seen it. What will its existence be in the new design, or will it exist still?
It will exist, but likely in a similar function that it serves today, storage and likely some mechanical units. You know, once we modernize the building systems, we'll likely park some units or some ductwork up there. It wasn't unfortunately super feasible to make those, you know, public spaces and get an elevator up to and all of
Right.
that. It
All right.
really- But they are
Okay,
cool.
my last historical question, because I know you mentioned it a lot. And the Randall Original Library housed some historic gifts from the Randall family that were different pieces from Stowe that were on display there. And I know you called it the historic entrance, and it's the historic building. Are those pieces going to remain there? That was part of their donation to the library?
the two marble pieces on either side?
No,
of the-
there was a collection of all kinds of little things from Stowe, from dishes to tools to like all kinds of little stuff that family had. And so there was displays in glass cases there forever since the library was named the Randall Library. So I just wonder, I guess that's not incorporated into the floor design.
All of it, no, we do intend on having some sort of historic display, but it won't be in those two large glass cabinets.
Okay, just wondering. All right, those are my questions. If we have to go with one of these, I can maybe go with the first, but honestly, I don't think it matches the architecture of the center of town where we have First Parish Church, the old town hall. It's our most historic neighborhood with antique homes. And especially number 2 and 3 look like it could be a medical office you're walking into. The first one, I mean, I get the concept, but I just was hoping it would match the other one more, like the Bolton Library did. Their addition just melted right into the original. But I know I'm only one opinion, but it's just.
Nancy, what about the what about the roof of the first one versus the third one, or the glass?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the cut up glass. There's just so much glass. I think that's what's going to hit you. Like the other woman said, when you come into Stowe, I wish there was more architectural detail like the old one has. I mean, I get you were trying to kind of match the turret with the pointed roof. Is that it? But it's just such a large, massive piece, whereas the other has twists and turns and details like the arch and I don't know, put shutters on the windows or something. It's just very stark to me, but I'm only one opinion, but and I know it's not easy, but it just seems so modern in a corner that is our most historic area of town. So, but.
Thank you,
just-
Nancy.
Okay.
I know I have some, this gentleman. Hi, your name.
Kevin Wesley,
Thank
Orchard
you.
Drive.
Thanks.
I'm relatively new to Stowe, also a former newspaper reporter, and it's wonderful to be at a municipal meeting and not have to. So my learning was earlier in the meeting when you talked about the complementary nature of preserving the original and having an addition that that honors yet complements and is different. And that's really stuck with me during this whole presentation. And I think that's part of the reason that the slope roof really does appeal to me. And I hear the arguments on both sides, but again, as someone new to Stowe, I think about driving up 117 and seeing that for the first time and wanting to know more, right? Why is that slope? What is that new addition? Boy, I haven't been to the library, but I should really check this out. And I think there's something very compelling about that from a street view perspective. And yet it does, as we've heard, it does honor and celebrate and complement the original so much. I also want to just thank both the committee and the professionals here for their work on all of this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. All right,
So Morgan's
all
first.
right, Morgan, you're on.
Hello, Morgan Hillman, 64 Crescent Street. These are fabulous. Wherever we end up, I really appreciate seeing them and seeing the choices. So a couple of my thoughts are, I see everyone's point. I don't love the slanted roof because it does remind me of the existing building and I'd like something a little bit different. I really think it's I think it was Andrew that said it in the beginning. It's really neat to think about the fact that this historic building was very modern when it was built, and to try to sort of follow the spirit of that with how we're building upon it and making it more modern for our times right now while still preserving and celebrating the existing building. So I kind of like the juxtaposition, and I know that we've seen some other ones that do a good job of blending the old and the new. And I know an example was that West Somerville branch, it's right smack in the middle of both a residential and a commercial area of town. And it really just kind of pulls them together. So I think that there's something to be said for that. Yes, it's a historic area. I live in this neighborhood. I live on the street, but that it's not going to be historic forever. And so I think it's okay to bring in some new things. I'm a huge fan of floor to ceiling windows, but I agree with everybody that it is a lot. And I know that that's a very contentious topic here. So I really like the first one, but I also really like it because of the color. I think that it's going to be too much brick otherwise, and bringing in the different colors and being able to connect that to the base and to maybe some of the materials that are used in the courtyard or in the steps or something also is a really nice thing. It makes it feel like it's complementary but not copying. So I think I covered it. Windows, cap. I mean, I don't know, can you stick a turret on the new part also so that it kind of matches? And people love that. That might help bring it together, but I think these are really great.
Thank you, Morgan. Carolyn, you're next.
Thank you. So I also want to thank everybody who who was working so hard to get us this far. I know that a very lot went into this. That said, I really want to agree with several of the things that Nancy mentioned. Nancy, you said, well, I may just be one person. Well, I'm with you on several of the items. I feel like all of the designs you've presented for the addition, it looks like a fortress. It doesn't match at all with, to me, the old building. And we don't need to keep recreating the past. I totally get that, totally agree with that. But at the same time, we have to accentuate it. We have to jive with it. I do think Bolton did the perfect job in matching their addition to their existing building. And I really wish what we had here was a little more along that line. So that said, and again, I'm sorry, but I'd like to see more mimicking of the original design. I'd like to see, I'd like to revisit the arch. So somebody mentioned that the arch is accenting the main entrance, but the main entrance on the ground floor is the one a lot of people are going to use because that's where they're going to park. So I'd like to see let's consider an arch there, or let's consider a way to work it in somehow. I definitely think you need to keep two different colors from the cap to the wall colors. I like the darker cap. I like the brick materials. I don't like the walls that break through the cap. I just think that doesn't jive at all with the existing building. Someone mentioned that in strategy 1, the cap, the whole second floor looks like a hat. And that's what I was thinking as well. It looks like a gray cap that got pulled down over the building. Can it just be, and that color just be on the angled parts of the, I'm going to call it the roof, even though it's not, you're calling it a cap. So whatever the right terminology is. I guess the window design, I also think adds to that fortress look. It's the really, really tall floor to ceiling windows that are in, I'm sorry, not floor to ceiling, but bottom of floor 1 to top of floor 2 that are in strategies 2 and 3 that I just think, I don't think it looks as great. I'd really like to see it broken up more like in strategy 1. I don't care for the asymmetry of the sloping roof in strategy 3. I'd rather see strategy 1 or 2, but that said, I'd like to see it look more like a roof, the way that the angled parts of the historic building, it's a roof. It's not just a cap. I don't know if I'm making any sense. So anyway, that's my feedback of one more person. So thanks for all the work that you did with it.
Thank you, Carolyn. Linda, you're next.
Okay, I'm going Number 3 that agrees with Nancy. I like view number 1. I like the look of it. I want to mimic or echo Alexis's comment about the archway and having it or a turret or more feel. I understand, yes, the Randall Library was new when it was built, but this is the historic center. And this building does remind me of a medical building. I know Morgan mentioned the West Branch being a historic building in a district, but the profile seen from the street is very narrow. It is 1/4 of the size of that original building. Most of their addition is in the back. This is in the front. This is the full view. And I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and I understand all that you're doing. And I very disappointed in the design here. I would go with number 1. I like the windows, I like the color, I like the look of it. The other 2 look like a medical building. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Linda. Alice, you're next.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Alice DeLuca. I live very close, right across the street. And my husband and I are just kind of looking at this picture and trying to understand it. I really love the old library building. I think it's beautiful. It's a delightful building to see. I just love it. And I'm kind of confused, and I want some clarification, please. Which street has the bicycle and the little dog on it?
That's Common Road.
That's Common Road. And what house is it that you can kind of see behind the red bud?
That's across Crescent.
Yeah.
But which one?
The one on the corner?
Oh,
it doesn't show it.
It doesn't show it on this print.
Yeah.
Right on the corner of Hartley.
Oh, maybe it's the old fire station, maybe?
No,
it's
the house
No.
across.
It's either the fire station or the Hartley House, which is now, I forgot who the family that lives.
Clark. So if that's Clark's, then my house is right next to Clark and it's pink. So it's not showing here, but this lawn that is showing here, it's really not, there's something about it that isn't proportional or something, because Clark's house is right on the corner of Hartley Road, and this lawn isn't actually there, in at least from what I see. So I'm confused by it. As far as the architectural design, the first one that has the dark top reflecting the dark of the turret and the roof in the original building, I think is aesthetically more in tune with the original building. I think the other ones kind of separate the old building from the new and make it look more like there's a kind of lugubrious Jane Eyre thing going on up there on the hill. And then there's this newer building that doesn't fit with it down below. So I feel like the dark of number 1, the dark top, actually makes it fit more with the older building. And I also think that you probably would have fewer bird strikes with the broken up windows of number 1 than you would with the tall, long panes of glass. And bird strikes is a big problem with large glass windows. So it's not something, it's just looking ahead to the future. You don't really want a lot of bird strikes. So that's something to think about and to investigate. And I just don't understand the vista of the lawn in reference to what I think is there. It doesn't somehow make sense to me. And perhaps I'm not understanding it, but I don't understand this picture that way. Anyway, I like number 1 better than the other 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Right above the turret.
Yep. Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Ehrlich, and I live on Packard Road, and I moved to Stowe right before the pandemic, so I'm totally a short timer. And if I know you said we don't have to pick between the three, but if I had to pick, I'd pick the first one because I prefer that the darker roof or cap goes better with the original cap. And I prefer that window structure. And just, you know, thank you for everything. And I know nothing about architecture, so here's my next comments, which agree with some of the others. To me, the old library from the outside looks lovely and warm and inviting and precious. And when I look at the addition, it looks hard and cold and lifeless and just like it's glommed onto the first one. So I also think I understood from what you said in the beginning that the addition can't mimic too much the original, but it feels like if there could be some elements of the original into the addition, it might feel like it was more cohesive. So to me right now, it feels really discordant. It feels like an apple next to a pear. Well, they're two fruits, so that's a. It feels like an apple next to an avocado, you know, like. So, thank you.
Thank you. Morgan.
So thanks, sorry, I won't take too long. I have two things. I think just listening to everybody's comments, I think reconsidering an arch in the new building's doorway and maybe some version of a turret on that far right end would help tie in some of the elements into both of them. But I did have a question. I think Caitlin was asking about just this landscape and what the view would be like. And just to sort of clarify, I know these are renderings and they're meant to show some of the landscaping, but isn't there going to be a ADA compliant walkway that is going to be through part of this, that it looks like a lot of green space, but it might not really be that?
Back to the site plan, I think, Andrew.
Yeah, it was.
Unless I'm looking at it from the wrong angle, but just, and again, not complaining, it needs to be ADA compliant, that's great, but just to maybe just remind us that what we're looking at is a rendering and it's not, there's going to be some things that are going to be different.
Yeah, there isn't actually going to be an ADA ramp or sloped walk that connects Common up to the historic entrance. That was something that we looked at, but it was decided at the last meeting that didn't want that.
Right, but I mean from Crescent to the old entrance. So if you were on the opposite side of Crescent Street looking at the library, looking at the old entrance.
Now, Morgan, the Crescent side.
Yeah, you just can't, the renderings.
Yeah.
So the renderings is not showing that.
So just to.
Okay.
Perspective a little bit that we're looking at, it seems like there might be a little bit of confusion, is where.
Can you
that-
verbally too, because people
Yeah.
can't see you at home?
That perspective is standing like kind of on that raised walkway and it's looking up the hill. So everything behind yours is hidden behind the hill. You wouldn't really be able to see it probably anyway, because actually what we're dealing with a lot here, which is quite difficult, is there's a change in grade of, I believe it's
right.
So you're actually under the historic entrance significantly, almost by 2 people height. So you don't see any of that, and you kind of would see this field of grass and this hill that we're reforming, and it would become Library Hill once again. I didn't mean to be poetic. I apologize. That is what is happening with the design.
Okay, great. So the crisscross walkway, the accessible walkway is actually much further over than the end. Well, not much, it's all not that big, but to the left of the main entrance. So you do have that greenery space, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ellen.
Hi, sorry, so I missed a half hour of this, but first I have to say I am a daughter of an architect. So I hear H.H. Richardson and I get super excited, but he didn't design Randall Library, right? I just want to be clear on that. It was the spirit of him, right? Whoever the architects mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, but so I actually of those three options, I would agree with the split, the sort of gray top with the two levels of windows, but I do think somebody earlier had been talking about sort of that, what do you see when you're driving down Great Road? And this isn't sort of what I get excited about in terms that visage is not as exciting as what we would see if you were driving down Crescent Street or Library Hill Road. And I guess I'm leaning towards the suggestions, a few people, Morgan just mentioned it again, around an archway or something on the bottom half of the entrance to do something more that echoes the original building, to make it look a little less modern. And I definitely, the long windows, I think, are just a definitely non-starter for me. I agree with Linda. They feel very medical or a very professional building kind of look. So I just want to, I so love all this work. The inside stuff was incredibly exciting and I'm super excited about it. So I appreciate all the work that's getting done, but I think we could make this a little more exciting on this entrance side. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, can I say something?
Of course.
I've lived in libraries for 20 years, and when the Library Land Project, Greg spoke last week, he put into words what I've been trying to think of a way to say. And everyone's so concerned about what it looks like from the outside, but I'm concerned about the inside. Most of the staff work in a space that has no natural light at all. And I, in particular, as everyone knows here, works in an office with no windows. And I'm not saying it has to be a glass box, and it clearly isn't. But think about the experience of the people from the inside out. The kids who are going to sit in those nooks, the staff that are going to look out of the window. I think these are amazing. I understand it's not going to look like an 1800s building. And I hear people when they say it looks modern, but that's where we are. I think it's 2023 and I think it's amazing. And I appreciate the style and the glass and the way it connects and the way it honors the old library. So yeah, I think it's great.
What about the roof and the base? Just trying to get as
I'm
much out of
torn.
people.
I mean, okay, so in a nutshell, I like the two-toned colors, whatever those materials may be. I personally like the high base and the way it connects with the old Randall, but I understand, I also do like the low base, so that's probably no help.
Excuse me, we could have three tones, right? I mean, we could have the base and then the brick, and then like number one doesn't show it, but you could still have granite or whatever on the bottom.
Right, and I think the second one is also two-toned, it's just a little less noticeable than the first one, right?
So the cap could be dark, but the middle could be,
Middle could be.
I do prefer the windows broken up in the first one, to the right, and like the community room in that part, rather than the full. What else didn't I answer?
Base materials, windows, I think you got them all.
Yeah. Denise?
so I do like the two-tone, but I personally, I think I would like it to just be the cap at the top, sort of the darker color. I think having it be halfway down, I think throws me off a little bit. I like the windows on the top one, the right-hand windows, but I think I like the left side windows on the bottom one, the sort of three shorter, and then the I guess, what is that, horizontal? So having sort of those windows in the top would make a nice effect. And I do agree that I think if there is a way to add sort of an archway over the new opening on the ground floor, I think that would be nice. Sort of looking at it from Library Hill to see the two mirrored arches would be a nice way to tie the two together, especially if you're using the darker cap with the, what I'll call brick tone, whatever that material is, but the more reddish middle piece, I think would be a nice symmetry to have the old and the new together. I don't know about the turret. I mean, I'd have to see what it looks like with another turret on there. But I would like seeing some type of archway in the new entrance as well, because I do think that would be a nice way to pull them together.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you asked me about windows before, so here I think that the full height windows are great, and I think what would help the presentation is if we could see renderings from inside, to pick up on what Tina said, because these clearly will make really wonderful spaces indoors, and I think everybody is focusing on the outside, because that's all we're seeing. And most people are gonna be using the library from the inside, and probably will forget what the outside looks like as soon as they get inside. Do you have any renderings of, from the other side of these?
We don't have any of the quality to show. We have a whole model that we fly around in, but that's kind of for the next step, is to start to like look at the interior in 3D space, which we haven't done yet, any of us, except internally. And so we'll start to respond to all of these comments and reflect that within the exterior, but also show how that's starting to reflect on the interior.
Yeah, stay tuned, something to look forward to. We absolutely will develop them.
Lisa.
Gigi, could you say something about the trees relative to the addition from this perspective? Because I think that's something that's lost in this. It looks very stark and you've just plopped a building on land. But the way the trees are placed in the diagram of the courtyard, they're going to create a third element to the windows and the finishings of the exterior that I think is worth trying to imagine what that adds to it and how it breaks up the feeling of the building.
We always close the trees to show the building.
I know,
but we
yeah.
should leave the
Yeah,
trees in because that's what it's
it's
supposed to look like.
It's always a
There you go.
debate, because it's very hard. Rendering trees in 3D is really hard because of the quality that they move, right? So they literally are branches in air and movement. So they, in a still like this, they look like a block, but in reality, you do perceive them as three-dimensional semi-transparent things. And in New England, 6 months out of the year, they don't have any leaves on. So they provide great scale and verticality in that space, but they won't be obviously shading the building at that point. So yeah, I think that the trees are really an important part of actually tying, across the whole site, that there will be trees kind of dotted in the slope. Obviously, again, we're hoping to keep that existing red bud, which already has some nice scale to it, but that there's a kind of drift of canopy trees that comes down and becomes slightly more organized in these courtyard spaces. And yeah, we'll really make the scale of those spaces feel very human. And you're right, in the perspectives where we're just seeing the building, there's a certain vastness to that. Those courtyard spaces look kind of vast, and they will not feel that way with a canopy over your head. Thank you.
Carol.
I agree with you 100%. I care 95% about the inside. And I thought tonight was about the outside. So I had one more comment.
Yeah, please.
One sentence. I'm loving the idea of an archway in the new addition entrance. It just feels like it would totally have them feel like they're going together, and that sounds great.
Thank you. Kathleen?
And just totally, you know me, totally off the wall question. Has there been any consideration of the field being something other than brick tone? And, maybe if your next presentation, just show us another color just to see. We may hate it, but maybe we should see it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, maybe it wasn't showing only these three options.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think, and I'm getting a consensus that everybody likes a dark cap. Everybody's assuming a granite-ish light color, maybe fieldstone base. So, and we've been assuming a brick field, but we haven't asked the question, what if it wasn't that color?
Okay.
Can I just do one more?
Yeah.
I have two comments of mine, and then I have some comments I'd like to share that came to me. In the original building, don't we have these little, you don't show these little
leaded windows.
Yeah. And I didn't know if there was a way to carry them over somehow that would tie in a little bit.
And we've actually discussed that internally, but we didn't want to just develop a leaded window design without coming with the larger window first to try and figure out the arrangement and the dimensions of those windows first, and then getting into the detail of the window. And it might not be a leaded, a 6 million window, but having that detail is something that
I
we've
think
discussed internally.
maybe would help tie the two together as
Yeah.
people want to.
So which windows are you referring to? I can't see what you're
This
pointing
is
at.
my picture. We don't see them on this illustration, but like the tops of the windows on the very left, the top third, I think, yeah,
Okay.
is actually got the leading in between. And we don't see that here, but maybe that's something that could be carried over to help a little bit. The other thing is, if you look at B or strategy 2, where the gasket is, I see some, but maybe it's a railing inside the gasket. I don't know what those horizontal lines are. A railing. I'm wondering if that could somehow maybe be a compromise between separating as it is in strategy 1. If you can describe it better than I can, but if you kind of continue that look over here.
Continued the horizontal datum with the railing into the breaking of the window. in the
Breaking
first
the window
strategy.
up between, not making it 2 distinct windows, but just breaking it in half and not making it tall. So those were my design questions. Now, if you don't mind, I have comments that I was willing to read online from reaching out on Facebook and Nextdoor. This is from the Clarks that live in the Yellow House. Fire station, Yellow House, library. Thanks for offering the opportunity to share written comments at this meeting because it wasn't exactly clear to us where to submit comments from the committee website. Work makes us unable to attend tonight's meeting. We live across the street from both the library and the former fire station. We reviewed design materials, and our concern is about the proposed head house for the cistern. We would oppose locating the head house on the lot of the former fire station for 3 reasons. First, it would limit future use of the former fire station property. Second, it would be a prominent eyesore. And third, it would limit parking in the center of town that is necessary for meetings and events at the schools and town buildings. A related point is that wherever located, we would like the committee to ensure that the head house is built with the same quality and attention to design and context and with the same quality of external materials as the library building itself. It is part of the library building project, and as such, the head house has the same opportunity to enhance or detract from the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Thank you, George and Elizabeth Clark. I went back to George and asked him, did he have any comments on the look of the library that's going to be across the street from him? And he said the materials, samples, what the inside sketches imply for the outside, and the site plan look okay to me. I'm okay with the modern addition that uses lots of glass. I don't think you can really replicate the charm of the old building. I think it would be a problem if the addition tried to mimic the old building too closely. I think it would be an uncanny valley sort of experience, only in architectural form. Had to look that up. It meant it would be creepy. About the head house and context, it should look good with either the library or the fire station with top quality external materials, not just a painted steel box plopped on the site as an afterthought. What those materials would probably depend on whether the site is the library grounds or the former fire station lot. That's what he meant by context. Kara Scomp, I don't have her address, but the new facade should blend with the old so that the whole building looks cohesive, similar to how Bolton did to their library. Anything modern that clashes would be absurd. Use brick and the same architectural style. And then Louise Peacock and Karen Benoit were concerned about the head memorial garden, which you've already addressed.
Thank you. Can I just make a point of clarification though for Ben and Andrew? If we were to put the fire cistern at the former fire station, we don't need a head house, correct, because of the elevation? We would need some type of pump system because of that's why we're looking at the grade level there, right?
I believe we would need a head house in the fire station as well, unfortunately. But that is part of this discussion, but it's also, there is other parts to that. Yeah, it's really complicated.
We were hopeful that we might not, if we could like make a low enough basement in the addition for but there's still not enough grade change, so I think, yeah, like Andrew said, I think we would need one.
Yeah, there's
Okay,
one option
Karen.
that might work, but
separate quick question. What is the purpose of that wall? That low C-shaped wall?
Kind of to contain.
On the
right?
left,
Over
it-
here?
it's,
Yes,
for most of it, it's actually retaining the slope.
Oh.
So that you can get into the lower part of the building
Thank you.
and have windows on that side, yeah.
But it also is retaining children.
Is it? Yeah, the very part that turns along Common Road.
Not, they're gonna be not 360, just a little bit retaining them.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Yeah, it's just,
Okay, correct.
it's to close the entrance a little
Yeah.
bit,
Okay.
just to create, yeah, it's kind of symbolic.
It's
closure.
a challenge of, we want to make that connection over to the common space in the memorial. So we want that to be an easy pedestrian connection and visual connection. And at the same time, we don't want it to be so wide that it is unclear kind of where the library spaces stop and the road starts.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna take Leslie next.
Hi, this is Mike. I'm using Leslie's laptop.
Hello.
Can you just clarify on the impact on Common Road? Is that still going to be maintained as a two-way street?
There is a thought to make it one way. And that's something that's the town has been discussing.
Yeah, I've heard that thought, and I must admit I'm strongly against it. I mean, if we end up having to access the library from the kind of the turn nearest from the church end, that's a very difficult left turn with a very short sight line to get onto that street. I mean, it would make the library much less easy to access from anywhere north of 117, or certainly from our direction. So, I mean, I've heard this comment that the traffic committee would like to close one lane of the road, and as I say, I'm really opposed to that.
Can you make it one way in the other direction? No.
I don't think so.
So the Traffic Safety Committee is looking into that. They have been for quite some time. In addition, we are working on a overall study of the common and the center and how that would be better handled with traffic and pedestrian access. So should Common Road be made one way, I would expect the turn radius to be expanded to accommodate that in both sight lines and traffic feasibility. But that's all in the works as part of this project, or to go in tandem with this project.
I mean, does the current plan require the use of the extra space that taking away one lane would require?
Right now, those courtyard spaces, yes, because we're also adding a sidewalk. So, currently when you come down the steps of the library at that lower entrance, there's actually no sidewalk. You step right into the roadway.
Right.
So, so there's a couple reasons why we're looking at trying to borrow some space there.
All right. Well, I just say I'm not very happy about that. I think it would make the library far less easy to access, and I think it would really discourage people from coming there if getting in and out of it was so difficult.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Linda, you're next, and then Nancy, and then we're gonna.
Nancy put her hand up.
Okay, Linda.
I just wanted to make a comment about the fire station, and I heard you mention there'd be the cistern or something there. So that's the site where the Hale School burned. And my understanding is there wasn't an awful lot of cleanup at that time when it burned. And it was kind of some of the debris was cleaned out, but it was basically just filled in. So I would hope that somebody would do some kind of a hazardous testing.
Linda, we're all over that. I mean, obviously that's where our PFAS site is. So we are actively working on the former fire station site for a number of reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to end public comment now. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Did you get everything you needed? I should ask you guys before I listen to the
I think
video.
so. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming, especially everybody that joined on Zoom and everybody that came in person. I feel like that was an enormous amount of comments that we can definitely work with. And I think just overall, I mean, getting comments is way better than nobody saying anything.
Right.
And we're just, we're moving forward still. These are all all tools for us to move forward. So, thank you so much for coming. And we have more of these.
Thank you so much. It was fabulous.
I don't think we have anything else.
We don't have minutes, so
I
I will
can't
make
do
a motion
minutes.
to adjourn at
Okay.
8:54.
Second, anybody?
Second.
Thank
Second.
you. All in favor of adjourning?
Uh,
Thank you. Unanimous.
Very good.
Great. And it's 8:54.
Yeah.